All right. Thank you all so much for joining us for that. I think the artists deserve a round of virtual applause. I find it, every time I've watched this, I find it more moving than the last. So what I thought, as I said earlier, we're able to take as many questions from the audience as we can through the Q&A feature at the bottom of top of your screen. But just to get the conversation started and to give you all time to pose some questions, I thought I'd pose one question to each of the artists. So first, Mr. Tang, can you just lead us through a little bit of your creative process? I mean, you created such a complex work. How did you go about conceptualizing this?
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, Philip. I think I'm lucky for have a chance to do this work. So I like to express my appreciation to the Philip to give me this opportunity and give me a lot of help during the long time production. I want to say thanks to Michelle for her helping. I want to say thanks to James Frozen to support me. And without all the help and the supporting, I don't think I can complete this work. And I also want to thank the great musician, Yuan and Mr. Kojiro. That music say a lot. It's really good. So great music. Okay, let me ask you the question. Basically, let me share the screen. Okay, so we start from this one. This one we already saw in the end. That's the Philip mentioned earlier. I want to make my video with some Chinese painting. Let Chinese painting merge with the shooting video. So that's my purpose. So then what's the shooting? How can make the shooting Chinese painting looking? That's the challenge. So I tried 3 things. One is the empty background. So this one is we use one of these. It's a potential. The empty background could be white, could be light color. It's a kind of a paper or canvas. White background, empty background in Chinese art is mean many things. It could be sky, could be river, could be cloud, could be fog. And the Chinese typically wants to have the empty background. In Chinese word, it's a 知白守黑. It means knowing the white and keep everything in the black area. And another way is a 记白当黑. It's the white area counted in the layout. So same as the black area. So you see, I copy this layout. And the second thing is in Chinese, mainly use the water ink. So, and limited use the color. So I do a lot of black and white. And if we put a color, try not that much colorful. Okay. 3 is a portrait inscription. And write some portrait on the paper. I think it started from the Song Dynasty. It's 900 years ago, become a tradition. So this one looks Chinese, but the portrait inscription is not literally translated the image. So the portrait inscription and the picture must be mutually growth from each other. And some shows portrait enjoyment of the object from nature. Some through the object express themselves. So Chinese garden itself is okay. Here as an example is the lotus. The lotus will have an article is Song Dynasty too. This the two sentences says 出污泥而不染，濯清涟而不妖. This in English translated is like the lotus rise from mud, but it remained unsolid. Is that right? and the bath in the clear ripple, but does not seduce. They say lotus, but actually they say themselves. That's why 900 years keep going. They like to draw, like the lotus is become. They think they are lotus in the mud environment. They still keep this clean. So that's why people like that. That's why we in Chinese garden always have that. Chinese garden itself is a big art piece. So full of the eye-catching visual and meaningful poetic feeling. I think everyone can appreciate from different angle. The video is only my one angle, and I hope that the Chinese garden is so close to us. So I hope every visitor can enjoy the great treasure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tang. So we'll pose some of the questions from the Q&A to you in just a moment. But first, I'd like to ask Wuman about her creative process, because you had a kind of difficult challenge. You were given this video with lots of beautiful images and poetry, and then you had 2 instruments. And how did you figure out what to do with it? And also, can you show us the instrument you were playing? Okay, you're muted still.
Yeah, so this is I'm playing pipa, Chinese pipa. Again, like Mr. Tang mentioned, when I saw his piece and couple of things, but also in the garden, you know, we always visit the garden, and Ko also close by, and like pipa and the shakuhachi just go very well, and the sound-wise, the color and the 2 characters. So that's how the idea came, like to those 2 instruments. I feel like if I use erhu or deeds, that's just slightly different than Mr. Tang's style. I look at his work. Again, Mr. Tang mentioned there are a lot of space in Chinese painting, but also in music too. We are traditional music, also a lot of, you know, long notes and waiting for a long time, but between the space, actually there are a lot of music going on, but not playing. There's a lot of different sound. same as I probably same as the shakuhachi, long notes, there's actually a lot of air, the vibrato going on. So, but I look at Mr. Tang's painting because a lot of space, but also I was thinking, how can I play with the shakuhachi? Because we both very kind of a space, leave space, kind of the instrument, that tradition. So you already heard some parts I was very busy. I play lots of notes. I just want to broken that because people have idea, oh, garden, Chinese painting, always slow, music, meditative, but somehow Mr. Tang's also very contemporary. So I feel like, okay, let's do something opposite. If very peaceful image, but I do very busy, sort of 紧打慢唱, you mentioned that. Sometimes that's the contrast between. So, and then shakuhachi coming in will be very slow, very beautiful. So that's people say, wow, that's different. But people are busy, 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 and finally dropped it. Oh, finally she stopped, and then the image comes a different season. So that's how the creative. It is a challenge. It is because during in the recording studio, we just watching the video and. By season, each kind of we stop and we watch again, we stop and we come up with the idea. Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit more about the Jinda Manchang? So fast drumming, slow singing. What's that idea?
Fast drumming, slow singing. So usually bang, very fast notes, but I play slow. But that's actually the beat's very fast. Da, 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 da. But also if they very slow beats and I could play fast. So if 1, 2, so that's the contrast. Very much in Beijing opera, a lot of time you hear people singing aria very long, long time, but you see the drum on the below, like very fast, so very fast, all those Chinese cymbal, Chinese percussion, but the singing very long, very slow. So that's amazing, and I love that kind of style. So this time we use sort of little bit that tradition in this piece. Of course, you hear a lot of all pentatonic. So this is kind of I grew up with. And as soon as I see the garden, because my hometown is Hangzhou, so as soon as I see the garden, the tea comes with me. Drink tea or play this kind of pentatonic scale. So you hear mostly I play pentatonic scale.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So Kojiro, could you give us your perspective on the collaboration with Wuman in creating the music, and also can you show us your instrument and as Wuman did, talk a little bit about how you created some of those sounds, because like Wuman, you created such a range of sounds from almost metallic sounding things to sometimes it sounded like you were blowing through raw bamboo or something. So those two questions.
Sure, of course. Well, it is said that the ideal sound of the shakuhachi is wind blowing through a bamboo, an old bamboo grove, where the bamboo is decaying, and you can just hear, some of the rustling. Sometimes you get a little bit of a pitch. So, I think inherent in kind of the philosophy behind the instrument, which is a Buddhist instrument, actually originally transmitted, or the second time transmitted from China to Japan, in Wuman's hometown of Hangzhou, right? There's actually a monument of a shakuhachi there if you go there now. But again, there's not one practice, of course, of the instrument, but certainly if you think about that philosophical sort of approach about the sound of an old bamboo grove, right? The idea would be to honor and respect the interior of the sound, everything that happens when you blow into the instrument. And as Wuman says, you don't do much actually. you know, per note, like if we're doing if I was getting paid on a gig per note, right? My note per you know, pay amount would be very, very high, right? So because I only play a few notes, but it's not about the note, it's actually everything that happens within it. So for example, I don't know, I'll play the classic all that material is available in the form of actually practicing the instrument itself. You know, Mr. Tang's just beautiful perspectives through the entire year, which is amazing, right? Going there just like on a regular basis and capturing, again, he says it's his angles of things, but we can sort of get the sense of finding your own narrative through an entire year at the garden is just a beautiful thing. And as Wuman and I, as we were actually given the videos maybe season by season, and then the bamboo clip, not necessarily the entire of what you were able to see today. And we responded to it, I think, in ways that are both, at times we bring the music together, right? With, like you're saying, like when Wuman is playing sort of in a pentatonic context, I think that makes it easy for an instrument like this, which also has a pentatonic sort of system, you know, built into it, to find some kind of musical moment, but then move out of that and observe what's going on in the video with the rustling of certain kinds of, you know, some movement, or, you know, just the perspective of the garden with certain rocks and things. And then for us to just change on a dime right there, and Wuman to sort of bring in sort of a different idea that is more about the sound or the space that she's talking about. So I think we constructed all of those. We sent it back then, you know, after there was a quarantine period, so there was a little bit of time where things were kind of left to sort of sit for a while, but we passed it back to Mr. Tang. Mr. Tang pieced it all together, and then we brought it back into the studio and we made some adjustments to the music. So it was sort of a few exchanges of back and forth, and really kind of nicely collaborative in that sense. Oh, and by the way, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm gonna plug. Forgive me here, but I'm gonna plug the pre-order of the album, which the music is for each one of the seasons, plus the bamboo segment that Mr. Tang sort of structured in his work, and it's a sort of reproduced as a music album. So you know, it's sort of like an add-on to your experience that you just had. So I'm just gonna share the link. It'll be available in November, and then the physical probably later on, but here it is if you are interested, and please visit that site.
Thank you. So I should also say one other thing. The video will actually be on permanent display in the garden. So as Kojiro mentioned, the video exists in two forms. One is the 40-minute version that you watched today, and then there's also a version that consists just of individual seasonal loops. So each of those seasonal loops will be shown actually in the new Chinese garden restaurant. There's a space for an artwork there, and every season will, of course, change the video. And then in some future exhibitions, we're planning to incorporate the 40-minute version as well, as a kind of artistic interpretation of the garden. So we've got quite a lot of questions already. We could maybe start with the simple ones. So first, how were the natural sounds and the music, or how were the natural sounds added to the video, and how did natural sounds and music relate to each other? I'm not sure who wants to take the question, but maybe we could hear from several of you.
Well, you hear some water sound. That's all from garden, and some birds. I think Mr. Tang recorded that nature sound because he's been there every day, in the morning and evening. So we added some bell. That's the Kojiro added in the studio. That's what we talk about during the process after recording. We look at the video again, so we kind of adjusted some parts, some between seasons, maybe something, but a lot of just nature sound from the garden.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Tang, how did you do the mist for the video? There's so much mist, and we live in such a dry place. How did you do that? You're muted.
I use the software is Adobe Creative package. So Premiere Pro is quite similar like the Photoshop. So it's easy to use. Only sometimes I have to put layer by layer, many layers. Yeah. Like
you actually filmed mist in the garden too, right? You used a smoke machine.
Yeah, but that's not really. It's really not good because of the outside. So many things it's hard to control. Is the wind, and the visitors. So this is hard to control. But just try many times. We eventually we can get something. Yeah.
So actually, in the course of filming the video, Mr. Tang caused a minor crisis with his smoke machine because the day that the local fire department was inspecting the Huntington, he was in the waterfall area filming, and suddenly this huge plume of fog-like smoke arose and was observed by the local fire department. And that led to some changes in how we organized the filming. We probably should have thought about things like that beforehand, but there was a lot of smoke involved. And then ultimately, I guess it was superimposed through layering in Premiere Pro. So another question, were you on location in the garden when creating the music, Ko and Wuman?
Ko, would you like to answer?
Were we on location?
Yes, were you in the garden?
No, but as Philip had mentioned before, Wuman, right, was in 2014, right? You were also sort of in a similar role of being an artist, brought in to do some concerts and various talks and so on and so forth. So I think we've had a relationship with the garden. So like even when we're in the studio, I think we can just sort of bring, sort of our understanding of the garden into it. It's nice to actually have a sense of the entirety of the garden, I think, even if we're looking at specific elements in the video, because we can place it and provide get a little bit more context about what the surroundings are.
So Wuman, a question specifically for you. Is the movement is the winter soundtrack more Japanese sounding? Or is there a very close relationship between Chinese and Japanese music?
That's a very good question. People always think that's very Japanese. Yeah, it is. As you mentioned, we shared in the early years in Tang Dynasty, we shared a lot of music between China and Japan. But this scale, particularly actually from Tang Dynasty. That's it. That's a few notes I found with the music ecologist, and so I inspired by that melody or that scale and composed my own. It is sound like Japanese, but who knows? All the days we all sharing culture together. And this particular piece in the winter, actually, I took from another original composition, Night Thoughts. So I slightly changed because Mr. Tang's the painting inspired me. Something I want deeper and very slow. So I use that tune.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Tang, this is a question for you. It's a bit more involved. So, the questioner says that the video piece seems to be inspired by scholarly artists, so by Wenren Hua, who typically were associated with the South. And similarly, our garden is a Suzhou style garden. So, but the Huntington's Chinese garden, in terms of its scale and especially in terms of its climate, is more like a northern garden. So did this difference in the physical conditions, so for example, the size of the buildings or the kind of light that's in the garden or the type of the weather that you experienced, did any of that kind of affect how you filmed? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, this somehow it's yes and no. Okay, yes is the weather. It is quite different than the Suzhou, and it's a because we shoot the Chinese garden is a Suzhou styles, so we have to do that. But in here somehow we have another thing is in our mind we can have a different season, and actually all of those the plants, it only a few chrysanthemums is not belong to the Huntington. Right now they plant it, but in that time the yellow one, for the others, the purple one, the pink one is in the Huntington. So all those become the 4 seasons represent. So I think since we shoot those plants, we still can deliver the 4 seasons feeling. Especially, I really like the winter. In Southern California, no winter, but actually the meihua and the shuixian, they are really nice. It is in Huntington. It is in Chinese garden. It's not fake. It's real. So still can deliver the feeling of the winter.
Yeah. So the plum blossoms and the daffodils that Mr. Tang filmed were all in the Chinese garden.
Yeah.
And they typically bloom here very early, sometimes as early as November, but usually December through about February or so. Great. We have a couple of questions about poetry. So one of the questions is how the poetic inscriptions relate to the paintings or to the images. Are there times when the inscriptions have no relation to the image? And then a related question, was all of the poetry chosen from traditional Chinese poetry, or where did it come from?
They all come from the traditional. It's no one is made by myself.
Can you tell us some of the poets?
Okay, I want to tell one interesting part. We saw in the winter time, we saw the dead lotus stay in the pond. It seems that nobody want to take off, and people always question why Huntington don't take off. I think Tang Dynasty a poem can answer the question. This says, 流的枯荷听雨声. How to say this?
Leaving behind some withered lotus, so that you can hear the rain falling.
Yeah, I think that's a really good feeling. So even you think that's maybe not good, but actually, if you can enjoy it, you can change the angle. It's really nice things. it's a really positive feeling.
And as you were creating the video, does all of the poetry have a relationship to what you're seeing on the screen? Or are there any times when the poem and the visual are unrelated?
It's I think it's all related. All related, and it's basically it's the portrait lead my shooting. So I want to achieve some portrait feeling. So I typically should go there many times to try to make that. And even have something didn't show the portrait line, but still, if you know, you may know the portrait lines there.
Great. And then for Wuman and Kojiro, can you talk a little bit more about your compositional process? Were any of the melodies inspired by traditional repertory for your instruments? Was it all improvised? Where did it come from other than your amazing imaginations?
The bamboo, the very beginning, that piece, that's co-composed himself. He just look at the bamboo, he just came up that Ko can talk about that. Other seasons, if you hear the pipa, yeah, basically, yes, improvised or composed at the same time. And a lot of music, it's in my head. It definitely inspired by all the traditional tune, but there's no specific traditional tune. You cannot find those tune in pipa repertoire. So it's somehow, it stays with me a lot, just like, everyone singing something, but made up something, but somehow from somewhere you heard. So that's how I came up. And also because Mr. Tang's the work I look at, and I grew up in this kind of garden because I'm from Hangzhou. Suzhou and Hangzhou, we're very similar, and we have a very similar garden. So every time I heard that kind of a style in garden, in my hometown area, so that's how I spontaneously start play.
Great. Ko, did any of the pieces that you composed for this come from traditional repertory, or was it a similar kind of process?
Yeah, I think it was very similar to what Wuman is saying, where I think there may have been some, I wouldn't call them quotations, but definitely some thoughts that came into mind from, folk music, for example, that I would be able to sort of shape certain kinds of phrases in a way, because we're responding to the video and there's a certain kind of tempo and a rhythm to the video too, a little bit. So, you would sort of employ kind of those things that you've heard already. And the beauty, and not that we completely stuck with a pentatonic system, we're going back to pentatonic system, but the beauty of the pentatonic system is that it seems constrained because you have 5 notes, and it seems like, you'll run out of possibilities for melodies or melodic phrases, and so it'll sound like something all the time, but but I think it's also that limitation allows for kind of an infinite kind of generation of material as well that is grounded in the repertoire, or especially in folk repertoires, but somehow you're able to expand it infinitely in some ways. And so I think that's kind of the space that we were working with in terms of just melodic material in particular.
Wonderful, thanks. So back to Mr. Tang, a question about painting. So when you were composing each shot or each section of the video, did you have particular paintings in mind, or did you find paintings to match the images that you had filmed?
In both ways, but for the Zhengbanqiao's bamboo, we have that first. So I have to find the good bamboo and try to film like that to match it. And some part is not. So I shoot first, then try to find the next picture. for example, in the outdoor, the bamboo with the stone, with the vertical stone. So I know many artists draw that, but I should that. So we cannot change Huntington's bamboo and the stone, but we can find there's some stone match that. I know many people, many artists doing that, but actually it's not hard to find it. So it's all famous artists.
And another question about the bamboo. In the opening scenes, did you paint the bamboo? Was that your own composition, or?
In the opening scenes, it's no painting there. It's all shooting.
Great. All right. I think we are reaching there are a few more things that are coming in. One is, do we think there can ever be a live presentation of this at the Huntington? Would it safe to do so? I think we all would very much like to do that. That was how this was supposed to have taken place. I think it was actually April 10th. We were supposed to have screened this, and Wuman and Kojiro would be accompanying it live, and it, I think, would have been an amazing event. So I think we all would very much like to do that in the future, in a year or two, whenever we're all doing things in person again. But I'm very glad that there's interest in that. I think I speak for everyone in saying we'd be delighted to. And then there are some questions about things like the names of the painters and poets that inspired Mr. Tang. We can maybe find a way to post some of those in the description of the video on Vimeo, maybe. I'll think about how we can do that. And then there are many comments thanking you for your perfect creation of painting, poetry, and music. Thanking you for beautiful film images and music, beautiful video, music, and wonderful presentation. This was a masterpiece suited for contemplation on the importance of beauty and life's fragilities and its continuous renewal. Wow. And I think that's probably a perfect way to end. So, but thank you, Tang Qingnian, Wuman, and Kojiro Umezaki so much for your amazing creation and your, incredibly generous support of the Huntington. I know this was not an easy project, and yet you made something that blows my mind every time I watch it. So
thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
And Michelle, and Mr. Tang and Wuman. It was really, really great to be part of this.
Great.
Yeah. So
the Vimeo link will remain active, I think, indefinitely. So please, please, please do watch the high resolution version of this artwork. It really is a different experience. And we'll look forward, I hope, to seeing everyone in a year or two for a live screening with live accompaniment. So thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Check out the CD, check out the music itself. Yeah. It's a different feeling.